Moon Dance is the 13th episode of the third season of Frasier. This is actually directed by Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer is in this for, I'd say, no more than 3 minutes. And that's quite interesting because obviously the show is called Frasier, but he really didn't need to be in it. The narrative worked so well, and the fact that Kelsey Grammer directed it just makes it all the more awesome. And I feel like I've watched Frasier before, and I feel like this is one of the most memorable episodes. And out of curiosity, I don't usually do this when I watch an episode, but I checked the top-rated episodes on IMDb because I had a feeling this one is very well loved. And it turns out it is the 6th highest-rated episode of all of the Frasier episodes on IMDb, and it absolutely does not surprise me. So there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode. It does start off with Frasier down at KCL, and he actually gets a call from a woman called Marlene, voiced by Jodie Foster, which is pretty awesome. And then we find out that Frasier is actually going to visit Freddie, and they're going to go to Colonial Williamsburg. That's why Frasier is not really in much of the episode. We then go back to the apartment, and Martin does this delightful towel intelligence test with Eddie, where he puts the towel over Eddie's head, and the more quickly the dog shakes off the towel, the more intelligent they're meant to be. And of course, Eddie just sits there, and it's the cutest thing ever. Niles comes over, and he's not very happy because Maris has been seen with other men, and as we know, he's still struggling with the breakdown of his marriage, so he leaves feeling dejected. A little while later, we get another great Eddie moment. There are several brilliant Eddie moments in this, and he's in the lift by himself, and then Niles comes over again. He has a date. He's very excited about this. He's going to go to this dance, and Daphne teaches him to dance, and we have this great moment where she's showing him how to dance, and everything's really great. And then when Daphne goes to get a cassette tape to put on some music, Niles actually gets a phone call from his date, and unfortunately she has to cancel. And he's about to tell Daphne, but then Daphne starts dancing with him, and Niles realizes he wants to continue learning how to dance with Daphne. He wants that closeness, so he doesn't tell her. We then go down to Cafe Nervosa, and we have a quote that I absolutely love. I don't know if it's a popular quote or something or if it's just something randomly that Niles said, but basically, Martin could see what he was doing with Daphne. Martin can see that Niles has feelings for Daphne. And I think this might be, if not the first time Martin has acknowledged Niles' feelings for Daphne, it has to be one of the first times. Obviously, Frasier is aware of how Niles looks at Daphne, but it's not something that Martin references that often. So that, I thought, was quite interesting. And he told him, "You're sticking a fork in the toaster with spending this time with Daphne." And Niles responds, "Well, my muffin's stuck," which I just thought was absolutely fantastic. And what's quite interesting is that he does eventually tell Daphne his date had to cancel, so he won't be needing the dancing lessons anymore. And Daphne just kind of invites herself to the dance. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I feel like it would have been better if Niles had asked Daphne to go, because I think it's clear that Daphne just wants to go because she wants to have a night out dancing, whereas if Niles asked her, it would be very obvious that he wanted her to be his date. And I think that would have been an interesting progression for the character and their relationship. So I don't hate that Daphne invited herself, but I think it would have worked better if Niles had asked her instead. Before they go to the dance, we go back to the apartment, and Eddie keeps bringing Mr. Pig instead of the banana to Martin as he's trying to get him to learn to recognize the word banana and associate that with his banana teddy. And it is just absolutely adorable. Frasier then comes back. We are 13 minutes in, and we last saw Frasier before the 2-minute mark. So pretty much all of this episode does not include Frasier, which is a really interesting thing, but it shows that Niles, with Niles being in the focus, is such an interesting character that he could also carry the show on his own if necessary, of course with Daphne's help. And then we are at the dance, and pretty much the rest of the episode is at the dance, at the ball, and Daphne calls Niles at his request rather than Dr. Crane, and they do this beautiful dance. Daphne looks exquisite. The red dress is just beautiful. It was a perfect choice. And after the dance, Daphne says she's on cloud 9, and we have a brilliant quote from Niles that I love, where he said, "I'd have to look down to see cloud 9." And isn't that just beautiful? Isn't that where we should all strive to be? Somewhere where cloud 9 is below us, where we are so happy that we are beyond happiness. And I just think that that was absolutely beautiful. They then do the tango, and it's a very hot, fiery dance. And Niles accidentally shouts out, "I adore you." And caught up in the moment, in the performance, Daphne says the same thing. And then at the very end of the dance, they kiss, and it is just beautiful and exquisite. And I'm so happy that we have this progression for the characters. But do we? Unfortunately, we don't. Because Niles is very much swept up in the moment. He's kissing her hand when they sit down. Everything is going perfectly in his eyes. And unfortunately, Daphne reveals that they were acting. She doesn't say it in a way that puts Niles down. She actually praises him for being a brilliant actor and making the performance so convincing, which I think is also really telling, because Daphne is then suggesting that she has no idea that Niles has any kind of romantic feeling towards her, which is really interesting because I feel like his infatuation is completely obvious, but apparently to Daphne it isn't. And that moment, it's beautifully framed, but it's heartbreaking. That moment where Daphne is smiling, looking around the room because everybody has been staring at them. And she did this so people wouldn't say nasty things about Niles in reference to Maris. And Daphne's looking around, pleased at the response. And Niles' face when he realises just drops. And it's absolutely heartbreaking and such an emotional moment. And when Daphne is in the bathroom, Niles gets a phone number from a woman, and we see him leaving the number on the table because he says he's not ready. And then when they leave, Daphne says something about trying new things and getting over that fear, and Niles goes back to get the number. And I think it's safe to say that Niles is in a very confusing headspace, and he's such a lovable character that that's obviously not great to see. So a little bit of an emotional episode, but the performances are brilliant. The dance number is beautifully executed, very, very well done, and an absolute joy. And then we end with a great bit of comedy as Martin is showing Eddie a picture he's drawn of a banana, and Eddie goes and gets the banana. How fantastic! And then the camera pans and we see, I counted 11 bananas. So Martin's obviously bought many of these to try and make it easier on Eddie, which I just thought was an absolute delight. So quite a different episode of Frasier, considering Frasier's in it for, as I said, I think less than 3 minutes. But a really beautiful Niles episode with some gorgeous moments, some emotional moments. And as I said, it's the 6th top-rated episode on IMDb, and at no point does that surprise me. Moon Dance is pretty fantastic.